Well, one big topic that we talk about a lot on this channel is the corruption of the political elite, the rich and powerful, and just how much the mainstream media does their bidding, carries out their wishes, smooches up to them, whatever term you'd prefer to use. Now, for those of you who may have some doubts, yeah, we know they're all kind of working together, but are you taking it just a little bit far? I mean, they can't be that bad. If there's anyone out there who genuinely believes that the political elite, all these swamp corporate politicians, are not pulling strings behind the scene to control what sort of narrative can get out to the American public, and that mainstream media is basically a tool that they use and probably deeply in bed with them. If you had any doubts about that before, I want to play a clip that was just uploaded by Tulsi Gabbard yesterday evening. Was a live stream on YouTube at a town hall event in New Hampshire. Now, she went through the whole opening monologue, so on and so forth, okay? We get to the first question from the audience, and the person in the audience was a Joe Rogan podcast listener, Joe Rogan Experience, okay? And they're going to cite a comment that was made during her last, most recent appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, okay? Now, the audio, before I get to the clip, the audio on the lady in the crowd is very quiet. You can barely hear it at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the gist of what she basically proposed, and then you can hear Tulsi's responses. Now, what she says to Tulsi after the initial question, I couldn't gather, couldn't make it out, couldn't hear it. We're only able to really hear Tulsi's responses, but it's going to be plenty informative enough, I promise you. But yeah, let's just go ahead and take a look at this in just a moment. So basically her question here is, why don't candidates like you and Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang, and I couldn't really hear who all she named, but just say what people would consider the more outsider candidates, more progressive. My opinion, you could take Elizabeth Warren out of that. She's a little on the two-faced side, but she's certainly trying to play that role of a progressive candidate, no doubt. So basically the question was, why don't all of you just have a little miniature debate, Joe Rogan be the moderator? Maybe all of you just go on the Joe Rogan Experience and have one big episode where he's asking you all these questions and you get to debate it out and so on and so forth while he's sitting there lighting up, blunts or something. Okay? No, she didn't obviously say that, but so that's kind of more or less the implication. And she wants to know that is it possible for something like that to be done? Okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the clip, and then let's hear just what Tulsi had to say about it.
Let's have a conversation. Let's hear what's on your mind. I'm going to come to you next. Yes, ma'am. We'll start with you. That's okay.
You were recently on Joe Rogan, and one of the big comments in the comment section was, wouldn't it be great if Joe Rogan hosted a debate between you and the other progressive candidates, Sanders and Warren and Yang? And I think that would be amazing. Are there any rules that keep you from doing that? I know the DNC doesn't really allow debates, but could you have a joint interview or something of that nature?
First of all, I love that you are a Joe Rogan fan. Thank you. I think it would be a great idea, and I think it would be an amazing and interesting and very real conversation. Unfortunately, the DNC does have rules that would prohibit that sort of thing. And the punishment, if you break those rules, is they don't allow you to play in their debates ever again. Well, for this election. We can appear at joint events so long as none of us share the same stage at the same time. So that's where you see sometimes there are different forums that they'll have multiple candidates showing up at, but none of us are actually on that same stage at the same time. But this is one of the problems, I think. And this was a rule that was implemented when I was vice chair of the DNC back in 2016 that I both privately first and later publicly strongly disagreed with. Because not only at that time were they limiting the number of debates, but they introduced this new thing, and I forget what the fancy name for it is, but basically where you're punishing candidates for being involved with conversations that will better help inform and engage more people to actually come out and vote. That to me is counter to and undermines the interest of having an informed and engaged, thriving democracy. I don't, I think what they would say is that they're trying to make sure this is a controlled and orderly process. But the problem is, you instead, you've got the DNC that partners with corporate media to host these debates that give us as candidates maybe 60, 75 seconds if they're generous to answer certain questions. Where even in the last debate, we were promised, hey, everybody's gonna get an equal amount of time, an equal amount of questions. That clearly did not happen. It hasn't happened yet in any of these debates. And it ends up being more of a political reality TV show than a real conversation that you, viewers, people who are looking to say, hey, I need to know more information on each of these candidates before I make my decision. And I hear from a lot of people really frustrated and who are just changing the channel because they're not getting that kind of information.
What did we learn from that little clip? That the concept of having one of these mini debates can't happen. Why can't it happen? Because the DNC instituted a rule that says you can appear at forums, but you can't be on stage at the same time as other candidates unless, of course, it is one of our approved debates. Oh, how high and mighty of you, oh lovely DNC. Okay? Now, what is the other red flag about this rule that was instituted? When did she say that it was put in? During her time as vice chair of the DNC in 2016. Now, what was going on right around that time period? Hillary Clinton was running for president. And so, what does this basically mean? It's a way to keep anyone who may have ran against the beloved Queen Hillary. It's a way to keep their mouth shut. Zipped shut. Okay? Why? Yeah, they could go appear at a forum. But like Bernie Sanders, for example, he can't go have these, like a small debate or something outside of the DNC inner circle. Can't do it. He could have pulled a Ross Perot. There's nothing that said he couldn't bought his own TV time if you want to do something like that. But you can't have small debate outside of it. And so take the two nobodies that ran basically outside of Hillary and Bernie. I remember in one debate they were complaining they weren't basically getting asked any questions. Well, they couldn't have had their own small debate outside of that saying, look, we're not getting asked questions. Let's go have our own debate so people can actually hear from us. Can't do that either. So, ironically, that rule was instituted apparently just before the almighty Hillary Clinton ran for president. Coincidence? I think not. Okay? And, of course, because of Bernie Sanders and how well he did in 2016, it makes perfect sense to me why that rule stayed in place. They knew that he left such an impact that, especially after Trump won the election, like, yeah, we're probably going to have a lot of people in the field. Bernie might try his hand again, and if he doesn't, there's probably going to be a few people, waiting around to step up and take their shot at it that agree with him on a lot of policy issue, and they're going to be a much more populist candidate than a lot of our corporate candidates, and we have to find a way to shut them up. How do you do that? tell them that they can appear on these different events. They can talk about it. Yeah, sure. You go out, you have your rally, you have your town hall. You can go to these public forums where multiple candidates can come up one after the other to speak, but none of you can do it at the same time. You can't have any debate outside of our debates. And if you do, you're not invited back to our little frat party. You're not invited back to our TV, reality show. You're not invited back to the next episode of the DNC Kardashians. You're not invited. Because you can't have debates that we're not a part of. We're your overlords. We're your masters. You answer to us. You kiss our ass. Don't go do it with nobody else. If you do, shame, 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 you're not invited back. That's how childish this crap is. Okay? Now, again, the reasoning behind it, think about it. What have they done to people like Tulsi and Yang in many of these debates, and even somewhat to Bernie Sanders? Now, you can't really say Elizabeth Warren. They give Elizabeth Warren plenty of time. Okay? But what did Tulsi say there? Yeah, they keep telling us they're going to give us equal questions, equal amount of time, and it don't happen. They keep shunning Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, not wanting to give them very much time at all, not wanting to give them proper time, to speak and be heard from, as much as, the Amy Klobuchars, the Cory Bookers, the Kamala Harrises, the Pete Buttigieg's, and the Joe Bidens. That's why it's, you may only find like one little highlighted clip or two of Tulsi Gabbard after the debates. But, of course, they go really, really viral because with a little bit of time Tulsi gets, she's taking a chunk out of somebody's ass. She's done it in every single debate. And imagine what she could do with about just as much time as Amy Klobuchar gets to talk during these debates. You would probably see some scorched earth crap by the time she walks off stage. If they let Tulsi have the proper amount of time that they give some of these other corporate Democrats on stage to debate, she would be walking off that stage. It would be like a Wild West movie scene. She'd be walking off that stage like old John Wayne over here, body strode here and there, and the gun smoke just stirring through the air, the wind blowing it along, and then she's going to be just walking off the stage like that, mystic Western, sheriff after the big gunfight. Yeah, I know I'm getting, out there into, the crazy talk a little bit, but yeah, that's what it would look like. I mean, it would literally look like she came in, took names, kicked ass, and left. And would have that old John Wayne, persona about her walking off the stage like the Maverick, basically. Where everybody else is just, down for the count. With the exception, of course, of, some deputies like Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders, of course. They're not going to be strutting around. But the Cory Bookers, the Klobuchars, the Bidens, the Buttigieg's, if she had the proper amount of time and the rest of them had the proper amount of time, oh my God. It would be an ugly, ugly scene in these debates. Okay, and that's why they won't give it to her. And they can't go anywhere else to really get heard from unless it's by themselves. Now, here's the thing. Bernie has been proposing that we do away with these debates. We don't need them. We should do things like what Ross Perot did back in 1992. That the TV network should be required to set aside allotted amounts of time, because this happens in other countries, where candidates get so much time to talk about whatever they want, whatever policy they want, so that the American people can just directly hear from them. While I agree that that is a grand idea, something like that should be done, I do think that, unfortunately, these circus debates, they have their place. But I don't think that it should be a circus debate. I do think we should have these primary debates as well as, obviously, the general election debate. They still should be around. We should have these debates where you can have multiple candidates on the stage at once, bouncing their ideas back and forth. And the reason why is, I can hear your proposal, but we're dealing with politicians here, folks. They're sneaky. They know how to say things and make it sound really, 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 really good. And so you may watch whoever came on in this particular time slot. You hear his proposals, and he has worked his narrative and worked his message just right so that it sounds very believable. And it would take someone else to rebut some of these things, because they obviously study policy more than, say, the average Joe who may be watching that program, and they need to rebut. But say that average Joe liked what he heard well enough, and then he doesn't know enough about it. Oh, yeah, I like that. Hey, that's my guy. That's my guy right there. And so he tunes out everyone else. If he doesn't watch them, which you could say, okay, that's his fault, maybe so, but let's be practical here. Someone hears something that they like from one candidate, oh, that's my guy. And if he had have had a chance to have heard a rebuttal from someone else, he may have said, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't sound too good after all. That's why I still think that that little process is necessary to a degree. You can definitely have that, but I do think we should have the debates. But somebody needs to rein in these news networks and stop making it a four-person show where only a select group of people get 80% of the questions throughout the night, and the other people who are not the corporate kiss asses to Wall Street and Big Pharma, the people who are not playing by those rules, get basically nothing and don't get heard from, and then can't go out and have their own little small debate. Now, what's the best way to start making the mainstream media stop that crap? What is the best way to whip them into shape where they start having more fair and honest debates? Well, my opinion, and there may be more that you could do to add to this to get that goal accomplished, but one thing you could definitely do is actually have a system where you're allowed to have other debates off those news networks, say on the Joe Rogan Experience. Okay? If you wanted to do that, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. And you know what happens? If they start doing it, and people start watching that as opposed to these, jokes of debates that they're doing on MSNBC and CNN, like clockwork. If people start watching those debates instead, start learning more from them, and it starts affecting the polls, guess what? These news networks are going to panic. The DNC is going to panic. They're going to say, okay, maybe we better just cut this out. But that's why they made rules like that, to prevent anything like that from happening in the first place. They were very calculated in their technique. Now, one final point on this issue, okay? Who had their own little rally / sort of debate, whatnot, during the 2016 election cycle? There was someone who said, yeah, I'm not coming to your debate. I don't like your debate. I don't think you treat me fairly. So I'm going to have a little event of my own. And he was able to rally up and gather a couple of other candidates to come to that event with him. Now, of course, these are people who were not going to be on the main debate stage, but they were still in the presidential race at the time, and he got them to come to his event. And it did not affect his poll numbers whatsoever. Matter of fact, might have even helped him. Anyone want to take a guess at who that was? Donald Trump. You see, I don't remember exactly which debate it was, but he decided he was going to boycott a debate, and it may have even been a CNN debate. And so, just up the street, basically, I think, from where that debate was being held, it was somewhere very near, very close by, if I'm not mistaken, he had his own little gathering. And I don't remember who the third person that came was, but I know Mike Huckabee was one of the people who came to his event, and he was still in the race for president. And I think there was one other person, but I cannot remember exactly who. But he had his own little thing. He got up, he gave his usual, and then he allowed these people in his event to get up, and they could make their pitch to the crowd. Meanwhile, there is a Republican debate going on somewhere not too far away. He had his own event. Same night, same everything. Yeah, he won the nomination. Donald Trump won the nomination. So he showed himself like, yeah, screw you. I don't like your debates. I don't like your style. Now, whether you agree with him on that or not, I mean, it's whatever. If you think they actually treat him unfairly, I mean, you be the judge on that. But it's just the overall point. He said the same thing back then. He went and had his own event. Yeah, he won the nomination. What did the Democrats do? Oh, no. No, you can't do that. No. We're your debate lords. You have to go through our debates. And if you don't, we're kicking you out. And you can't come back to another debate. Freaking childish. And it is just further proof that these DNC corporatists, these corporate Democrats and the elites in the Democrat Party, and really the elite politicians on Democrats, Republicans, whatever, the people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes are in bed with this mainstream media to keep voices like Tulsi, like Andrew Yang or Sanders completely down, completely out, and completely unheard from. And that's why they keep putting rules like the super delegates they started however many years ago. It's a way to try and rig it so they get the nominee that they want, okay? Like this rule that you can't go have little conversations and debates with other candidates outside of our debates. Not allowed. You can't do it. Why? Because we're going to control who speaks and how much the people are going to hear out of you. We're in charge of that, and you don't get to decide it because we're the ones in control. It's a freaking joke, and again, it's just further proof you can't trust this mainstream media, and you really can't trust this Democratic establishment because they are so corrupt and in the tank, it is unbelievable.